Yeah, let's go. Oh, hey, good afternoon. Welcome to the Stochastic MLB Live Before Lock Show. Dave Loughran and Greg Ehrenberg. 8-game action today. DraftKings never hesitates to throw that 4 o'clock one in there when they know there's no late slate. You know what I mean? What's up, dude? How you doing?
Yeah, man. Got afternoon baseball today. No real night games, so we only have the MLB Live Before Lock in the afternoon, if I'm not mistaken.
There's only one game at 7 o'clock. That's it.
Yeah, only one game at 7 o'clock. Also want to let you guys know there's a very weird schedule for the NBA tomorrow. Don't know if you had seen this, Laffy, but the NBA slate locks at 5:30 Eastern time tomorrow. That's the NBA playoff schedule. First playoff game is 5:30 tomorrow. The reason, and there's going to be a point to this that ties into baseball. The reason for that is because ESPN has the rights to all the games tomorrow, and they didn't want to compete against themselves, so they're just starting super early with like an evening game. So tomorrow, Eric and I are going to be doing something different. So we're doing NBA Live Before Lock from 4:30 to 5:30 Eastern time, and then on the playback show, we're going to be hanging out for the rest of the night, watching basketball games. We're also going to do MLB Live Before Lock over on playback after the basketball slate starts. It just seemed like the easiest way to cover both of them tomorrow, considering the weird basketball schedule.
I love it. Maybe I'll join you. Come pop in and say hi.
Yeah, man. Do it for sure.
Sweet. So yeah, 5:30, 8 o'clock, 10:30. Interesting. All right. Well, today, another weird one. Nothing on the night games. It's a Thursday. This stuff happens. You know, a lot of these business person specials. You're not allowed to call it businessman special anymore, right, Greg?
No, not at all. Not at all. I call it I don't even call it business anymore.
What do you call it?
I just call it, this is my pathway to paying bills. You just don't know what you could upset people with.
It's just true. Yeah, it's a person special. But oh man, you know what? I'll talk to you about this some other time. We only have so much time. It's a Live Before Lock. I don't want to waste your guys' time. But anyway, tools are updated. I got the top stacks tool, top pitcher, lineup generator, run that as well. And of course the lineup simulator. So we've got everything on tap here, teed up, ready to go. Happy to have you guys with us. And hey, if you haven't done so yet, take one single second this fine afternoon and atone for your sins. Hit that thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. It goes a long way for us. We appreciate you for it in advance. Just a subtle reminder. Many of us forget we've got busy lives, but here I am pleading with you. No, actually just asking kindly. Hit that thumbs up. Let's get going. All right. And as always, happy to see all the regulars in chat. You guys make this show. If you're new, welcome. Glad to have you guys here. I don't know how you found it, but you did, and that's good. Anyway, as we usually do, Greg, talk pitchers, talk stacks, perfect format for these morning shows or early afternoon Live Before Locks and stuff like that. At the top of the list, we have to dive straight. I'm not going to Simeon Woods Richardson yet. I'm sure you are. I'm sure you've been collecting cards from him. You have merch, jerseys, and all of that, correct? This is somebody that you've been very familiar with, following throughout the minors?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay, yeah, I'm joking.
Yeah, not at all. This guy, I saw his name and I was like, hey, there's a UFC fighter named Sean Woods, and that was my interaction with him.
Also, how does this work? His name's not hyphenated.
It's not?
No. So like, is Woods his middle name? Or did he just rebel and go Woods Richardson? Well, not him, but his family. It's not hyphenated. It's odd. Either way.
Maybe he took his wife's last name.
That's a sin. Don't get me started.
I don't know.
Don't get me started.
I was trying to rile you up a little bit.
Yeah, you did. If my wife said, hey, I'm not taking your last name before we get married, I'd say bye-bye.
So there's
is that too much?
There's a UFC fighter, Ian Machado Gary, who gets made fun of all the time on social media by MMA fans because he has the last name of his wife's ex-husband. The reason being is because his daughter, his now adopted daughter, he didn't want to confuse her, so he wanted to have the same last name as her. So he took his wife's ex-husband's last name so that he would be able to relate to his daughter more. So he did it with good intentions, but he just gets made fun of and called a cuck 80 million times per day on the on MMA Twitter.
Yo, that is insane. Wow. That, I wouldn't say it to his face, but that's insane. Beyond me, beyond belief, really. Anyway, I want to start at the top. We'll work our way down to the three names: Simeon, Woods, Richardson, getting a lot of ownership today. Just so happens to be facing the White Sox. But Zach Wheeler, 10K against Cincinnati. We're looking at now a spot where it's a 55. Look, it's a good park for hitting. There's no doubt about that. But no winds blowing out, nothing significant like that. 55 degrees in Cincinnati. Of course, it's an earlier game, right? So you're still not getting really warm temperatures. 55 degrees, and a Reds team that strikes out at the third highest clip against righties on the year. Wheeler getting more Ks against the righties by a wide margin. We know that, than he does against lefties. But you're still looking at 5 righties in this lineup today. Some power up top, no doubt about it. But I mean, it's a good matchup. Low implied total for Cincinnati, and Wheeler rightfully getting a lot of ownership today in this spot.
Yeah, he is the second most popular pitcher on the slate, behind the aforementioned Simeon, Woods, Richardson. So we've got 41% projected ownership going to Zach Wheeler. We've got 49% going to Richardson, Woods, Richardson. Do we call him Simeon, Woods, Richardson? I don't know. Whatever it is that we're going to end up saying is his go-to name here.
Dude, you can't even call him SWR or any. You know what I mean? Like, you can't even give him the acronym, the initials.
Yeah, we'll go with Richardson. We'll stick with Richardson. Wheeler and
Sure.
Richardson, just for start, super simple. If you guys are building your lineups today and you're playing cash games, you're playing him in cash, right? There's something that it's just easy thing to get out of the way for people who are going to be asking us about that later. Considering all the ownership going to these two guys, there's only 3 pitchers in general on this slate that are north of 20% owned on DraftKings. We got 3 real chalk options here. Now we have to try to figure out, like, all right, in large field tournaments, relative to the ownership, what are we going to be doing with them? And for myself, I am getting to a ton of Zach Wheeler. Zach Wheeler is currently in 58% of my lineups. And this is something that I'm trying to set up my lineups to make it as accurate to what my actual exposure are going to be, because it's, live before lock, but we are waiting on lineups to come in as well, which could end up changing some of this over the course of the show. But Zach Wheeler to me is a good piece of chalk today that I do like getting to. One thing that is really nice about him as well, this is an actual ace starting pitcher. We've had a ton of slates lately where guys are in the best spots. They might be expensive and the field just kind of gravitates towards them, but they're not actually real true sort of aces. Like Clark Schmidt was crazy popular yesterday against the Oakland A's. Good spot for him. Didn't have the best fantasy result, but also not a guy we typically would really consider an ace. Zach Wheeler is, and that's something that gives him more security than a lot of the other chalk starting pitchers that have failed in recent slates.
No, it's a great point. He's one of the best in baseball. I know he had that rough start against Pittsburgh where he coughed up that 3-run homer late. Dude still had 10 Ks. He went out against, another high strikeout, clearly a worse team with less power and talent in the White Sox than the Cincinnati Reds, but he carried a no-hitter into the 8th inning, Greg. Like, yeah, you're right. This is he's more than an ace. He's a Cy Young candidate every single year, right? Like, he's up in the top every single year. Phenomenal play today. Then you start getting to a few other guys who, I'll be honest, like, as much as I like Jose Barrios, and I think he's a great pitcher, the upside is not the same. Like, yes, he's efficient. He can pitch deep in the games. He's gone 6+ innings in all 5 starts this year. I value that a lot in pitching. You guys should too, right? Like, guys that can work deep into games, keep runners off the bases, limit runs, all of that is huge. But if he gets you 6 strikeouts, you're happy. By the way, weather in this game, not looking good. My guess is it gets pushed back quite a bit, but it's an early game, so I'm not too worried. And then somebody like Yamamoto against Washington, clearly a good matchup, big favorites on the road, not a good Washington offense, but do you love the strikeout upside here? And do you want to take $400 savings over Wheeler? Or do you want to take $600 savings for Barrios over Wheeler when they're so close in price.
Yeah, so Jose Barrios is not all that popular on the slates. Like to me, the only real case for Barrios would be the low ownership. But I agree with how low his ownership is. And while I also think the most likely scenario is that the Toronto KC game plays and probably without too much of an issue once it actually gets going, there is still some risk the game doesn't end up playing. So that does make me a little bit hesitant to get to a contrarian option that I also just don't really like all that much. So in my lineups right now, out of the 150, I built two out of 150 lineups have Jose Barrios. I don't think he's probably going to come in slightly higher than 2% owned. Not like to the point where he's going to be 10% owned or anything like that, but even him being like 5%, that does make a difference in terms of how good he looks as a contrarian option on the slate. So there are other pivots I like getting to, but this isn't going to be one of them for me.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to get to. And, Green Mateo in chat said, so fade Wheeler, LOL. I mean, look, I get what he's saying, right? That Wheeler is going to be very popular. The question, I guess, there is just like, who are your pivots then? Is your pivot Jose Barrios? Is your pivot a Luis Castillo, whose price has come down considerably after a rocky start to the season, coming off a great performance in Colorado against the Rockies? But is it Justin Verlander making his second start of the season at 41 years old? Is it Yamamoto? Like, who are the quality pivots there, the leverage spots, or do you just try and get different at stacks and with your bats?
So to me, the pivot is going to be going to Yamamoto, and he's still also somewhat popular. But I do think that this is somebody who going forward is going to be very, very good. We've seen that he has really good strikeout stuff. The results have been inconsistent. He has struggled with homers, but this is a guy who coming into the season was one of the most sought after free agents we've ever seen come from overseas. And his results so far this year, while not great, not terrible either. He has a 4.5 ERA, a 4.05 expected ERA. But for fantasy purposes, what stands out the most to me, he has a 32.3% strikeout rate. And if you're looking at what takeaways can you have from a 5-game sample size where you might feel good about somebody, the 32.3% K rate combined with a 5.4% walk rate clearly is good stuff. If you see some of his breaking stuff, it is unhittable at times. His fastball velocity is on average 96 miles per hour. So if you've got a guy who's got really good stuff, generates a lot of strikeouts, doesn't walk a lot of hitters, that is going to end up working in the long run more often than not. Every single projection model is very bullish on him going forward, not just in terms of him pitching better, but legitimately being one of the best pitchers in baseball for the rest of the season. So that's the pivot I like making. He's not going to be 5% owned or anything like that, but there is an ownership discount on Yamamoto compared to Zach Wheeler.
I'm with you. I mean, and also, are you a bit surprised to see that Washington against righties this year? And the sample's big enough to where we can at least say, all right, there's something here. 600 plate appearances, top 10 in ISO and WRC plus, and weighted on base average. Like, does that surprise you?
Certainly better than we thought they were going to be before the season.
It is, but also, and 21% strikeouts, which is another thing that you don't feel great about. But what you said can't really be ignored. The strikeout stuff in Yamamoto is massive. I mean, look, you could see 3 strikeouts for Joey Gallo alone.
Yeah, that's true as well. There are some individual, let me think, who are all the other guys in that lineup?
So I don't think we have, do we have the confirmed lineup yet? Let me see.
No, because it's one of the later ones,
Yeah,
which also with that game, actually, it's the only 4:00 game if I'm not mistaken, but we probably aren't going to get that lineup until after the slate locks. Not a massive issue on the Washington side because I'm not going to be stacking them on this slate either way. But yeah, there are some individual hitters. Joey Gallo, he's somebody who could certainly strike out at a good clip. Nick Senzel being another one, assuming they're both in the starting lineup. So yeah, there are some individual hitters who it's like, yeah, maybe Yamamoto won't be able to strike out guys who are better contact hitters like Luis Garcia, but maybe Joey Gallo and Nick Senzel strike out 3 and 2 times each.
Exactly. Well, anyway, for me, yeah, Wheeler, Yamamoto, then Barrios in that range. And I think Barrios kind of a distant third here. Also, I don't want to say I'm terribly concerned about the weather, but I think that's just another reason that I wouldn't be super high on him. We do have him positively leveraged. We have Wheeler negatively leveraged, but also 30% top 2 pitcher in the top pitchers tool right now. I guess it's probably time to talk. Well, no. Okay. Tristan McKenzie. Remember you and I last show spent a while breaking down like everything that had gone wrong with him and had been going wrong, his velocity, his swing and miss stuff, all of that. Well, he went out last start and had a nice start, but I went back and looked. His velocity on his four-seamer was still south of 91 miles per hour. He had a 2.5% whiff rate on his fastball still. And it was, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't it against Oakland?
Yeah, it was against Oakland. And Oakland actually ended up being popular on that slate. That shows you what people think about Tristan McKenzie right now, is that I thought Oakland was going to be a good contrarian stack. They weren't projected for much ownership. And then the slate started, and he actually gave up a home run, if I'm not mistaken, that start to Toro to lead off the game. And I'm thinking,
Third
like,
pitch of the game.
Good start for Oakland here. And then I look at the ownership. It's like Toro was like 20% owned on that slate. It was everybody was stacking against McKenzie. But yeah, even though he ended up putting up a decent result in that start, I didn't see enough to think he isn't broken. The velocity was still down. The strikeouts were okay, but it was more to do with what the matchup was than telling about McKenzie himself. His numbers overall for the season are still terrible and pretty concerning.
Yeah, I'm not huge on it today, and he's pulling like 14% ownership right now.
Yeah, 13% again. And it's a tougher matchup against the Red Sox.
I'd rather pay down to Andrew Heeney.
Yeah, I'm looking through everything that
And
I
Heaney's
have
been terrible
here, and not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but yeah, if I'm going to be looking for a more contrarian option in the low end, it is Heaney for me.
Yeah, and he has sucked. Don't get me wrong. It's not been good by any stretch. So please don't assume that I'm saying Andrew Heaney is a lock today by any at all. But you know, it's still a Seattle team that has a lot of strikeouts. Less against lefties this season, only 23.5% as a team, but only 200 plate appearances. There's strikeouts here. I don't love Heaney. I don't love McKenzie. Verlander, decent pitching weather, wind's blowing in at Wrigley. It's not warm there. Second start of the year. He looked good in his first start, but Verlander to me is just another one of those guys that's there. I'm not in love with Verlander today. Are you?
I don't think he's going to have a super long leash to go all that deep into games. And let me pull up what his pitch count was in his first start, because he didn't have like, he scored 19 fantasy points. He only threw 78 pitches, though. When you consider that he started the year injured, he's working his way back. 78 pitches in his first start. What does he get to today? 85, maybe 90. I think 85 is probably a little bit more likely. Honestly, like today where there are 8 games, there's a lot of spots to choose from. It's a tough matchup for Verlander against the Chicago Cubs. I'm very, very dubious that he has a crazy amount of upside in just his second start of the season when it appears he's going to have a pitch count.
I'd give him 90.
It's possible. It's not guaranteed, though.
No, and it doesn't mean I like the spot anyway. I honestly think in that range, like if you're factoring ownership and price point in, the $8,600 Luis Castillo, I know it's not a good spot. I know the Rangers don't strike out at a high clip, but he's still like the strikeout stuff has not gone anywhere with Luis Castillo. He's gotten into some trouble earlier in the year. I believe he's coming off a really good start, if I recall correctly. But
yep, in Coors Field.
Yeah, right. We mentioned that earlier, but he's still striking batters out at almost 30% on the season. I don't know, man. His strand rate is going to get better. His opposing BABIP 392. It's not like he's giving up a lot of power. He's not walking a ton of batters. He has a 2.53 FIP, a 2.7 xFIP this season. I think the positive regression for Luis Castillo is on the horizon. It's just a matter of how comfortable are you playing this guy, even at a discount? Because, you know, if things get better for him and he starts getting a little bit luckier than he's been, that's a 10K pitcher for sure. The question is, how comfortable are you with him against Texas?
I wish he was lower owned. That's probably the biggest issue I have there. So I do come in a little bit underweight to the field on Castillo, but it's because the field is getting there at 17%. And there is somebody who's slightly cheaper. I like a little bit more than him in Cole Ragans. So Ragans is $8,300 and only projected for 8% ownership. We do still have some of those weather concerns we talked about before, where it does have me off of Buos. And while it's the same game, I'm willing to take the chances on Ragans just because he is somebody who I think has more upside. He is one of the best strikeout left-handed pitchers that we have in all of baseball. The matchup is certainly hard for him against the Toronto Blue Jays, but here's something for reference. We have Castillo projected for 17% ownership. We have Ragans projected for 8%. So he is half the ownership. Also, we've got Castillo 18.1% chance to be a top 2 scoring pitcher compared to 17% chance for Ragans. And then also, you're getting a little bit of a salary discount on Ragans. So he's less expensive marginally. He's lesser owned. That's pretty significant. And then the projection is pretty much the same in terms of fantasy points and odds of being a top scoring pitcher. So if I'm looking to pay for one of these guys that's 8K or more expensive that isn't picking up ownership, Ragans is the answer for me. I think he is the most upside for the least ownership.
No issues with that. I love Cole Ragans. I think he's awesome. I know he got blown up by Baltimore, but it happens. He's a great pitcher, and he's only going to get better. But you would agree, though. This is one of these slates where you wouldn't be shocked to see one of these like lower owned, 10, 11, 12, 13% owned guys just go nuts because you have some good arms. Castillo is verifiably good, objectively good. So is Ragans. They're getting, 10, 12% ownership. A lot of these guys beyond Woods Richardson and Zach Wheeler, and I guess you could say Yamamoto at 23%. No one's really pulling that much. You have 5 or 6 guys in between 10 and 15% ownership. Outside of McKenzie, who I don't really have much interest in just because I don't think he's completely solved those issues, and Oakland masks a lot of issues with opposing pitchers. I think you could say any of those guys. I'll even throw Buos in there against Kansas City. I don't love him, but I wouldn't be shocked to see any of those guys go out there and have a really nice game today. So I don't think any of them are out of play or just off the table.
For sure. This is one of the better pitching slates we've had in quite some time. There are a lot of viable options to go to, which does mean we have to pick and choose a little bit in terms of who it is that we're going to be over and underweight to the field to. And just relative to ownership, the answer for me is going to be Ragans is the guy in this price range that I'm most apt to get overweight. He's also the easiest to get overweight to considering how low his ownership is. I don't have an issue with Luis Castillo. He just didn't make the cut for me relative to his ownership. I currently have him in, where is he? Yeah, he's in about 10% of my lineups right now. So I have a little bit more of Ragans and at lower ownership.
We had a comment in chat from Chris said, yikes on Heeney. I'm stacking Mariners against him today. Yeah, you should, man. Like I don't think Greg would argue that either. Like this isn't baseball's not one of the, obviously if you're playing one lineup and or 3 lineups and you're stacking the Mariners, then you're not playing Heeney, obviously. But like baseball's just one of those sports where you could think the pitcher's in a decent spot and also won some bats against him. Like Paddock the other day was an example of some people say, you know what, low-owned White Sox. Paddock goes out there, mows them down. Other spots, though, you see it all the time. Seattle's one of those teams. Minnesota's one of those teams. Even the Rockies, like you had the other day, that won you or they placed you second in a tournament. For anyone to say, oh, I'm not going to touch the Rockies against King, who was popular, it's crazy. So, yeah, but King could have also gone on to had a 30 fantasy point game. So I think Mariners bats look great today against Heeney. He has homer issues. His strikeout stuff hasn't been as good as it's been in the past, and he puts the ball in play. So yeah, no issues there at all.
I'm overweight to both of them. I have 10% exposure to the Mariners, so slightly overweight because they're only projected for 9% ownership. Actually, I'll refresh because I think we might have had an ownership update since I refreshed it. Yeah, same deal though. So they're projected for 9.5% ownership. I have them in 10% of lineup, so about even with the field on Seattle. And then Andrew Heaney, who's hardly projected for any ownership at pitcher, 11%. I have 20% of them. So I'm a little bit overweight to both sides, a little bit more overweight to Heeney, but there's clearly tournament upside on both sides of that spot.
Absolutely. John asked, so the weather is not a factor at all? Well, no, I mentioned it. We talked about it. The weather in that Kansas City Toronto game is concerning, but it's a 1 p.m. Central game, 2 p.m. Like, I don't know. Wouldn't you think? Look, neither you or myself claim to be meteorologists here, but you would think with a day game that they would just push it back.
Yeah, and let's see the Cincinnati weather right now. Also of note that these are not division rivals. So that's another reason too, where if it's like, the Phillies are playing the Mets, for instance,
you can make that up
hey,
easy.
We're scheduled to play 1 billion games against each other this year. If the weather's shitty, we'll just wait for a better day. But for this particular spot where there's expected to be some rain in the afternoon, but then it actually looks pretty clear for most of the day now that I'm looking at it right now. There's if it rains a little bit and they just want to wait, there's plenty of time to play the game later. And it's important, like you said, it's an afternoon game.
So here's what I'm going to do. Because we have a few guys we haven't talked about. We can just rapid fire these spots. And then we'll talk about old SWR. I almost said SJW. SWR.
Can
Dakota Hudson.
SJW?
What's that?
We might as well. That could be his new nickname. He's SJW.
Why though?
Why not? It's close enough.
I guess so. Yeah, I mean, that's what it would be. Nah, never mind. Dakota Hudson against San Diego. No. Chase Anderson at Cleveland. Soroka at Minnesota. Nick Martinez against the Phillies. Javier Assad. Randy Vasquez. McKenzie Gore. Those are the guys we haven't touched on yet. Do you have any thoughts on any of them?
Yeah, I'm not going to play them. Those are pretty much my thoughts. These guys are all projected for 1 to 2% ownership, and for good reason. I don't think any of these guys are worthwhile or have any kind of significant upside.
I'm always willing to run out a pitcher against Minnesota, just not Michael Soroka.
Soroka's terrible.
Yeah. McKenzie Gore's got some filthy stuff. It's just not the spot you want to do that in.
Yeah, we've got McKenzie Gore pitching against the Dodgers. I would prefer to not make a habit of ever rostering pitchers against the Dodgers. And he also has some ownership. He's 7% owned. It's not like he's one of those 1% guys. And yeah, then you just got other guys. You brought up Soroka. I mean, Soroka's got a 7.5 ERA, a 6.82 expected ERA. He's got a strikeout rate that is close to 10.7%. I was going to say close to 0, but yeah, I mean, that's hardly striking out anybody. He walks more hitters than he strikes out. You got a lot of low-end pitchers on this slate that we could write off for a couple of reasons. Number one, they themselves aren't good. We don't have them projected well or anything like that. But there's also so many good options that, like, why do I even want to take a chance on a Michael Soroka with all the other stud pitchers on this? Like, he has to outperform all those guys.
Yep. Jordan, so you have the lineup generator up there. I see that our top 2 exposed pitchers are Zach Wheeler and Woods Richardson. Who is our 3rd highest exposed pitcher in the lineup generator?
If I had to guess, it'd probably be Yamamoto.
Oh,
let's see.
Cole Ragans and Luis Castillo, 20% each.
Interesting. So Yamamoto just not showing up then?
Not 10%.
Yeah, all the way at the bottom.
Not a lot. Which obviously you guys already know with the lineup generator, you can lock a player and you can swap players out. I think one way to do it too. I don't know about you, Greg. By the way, guys, $5 for your first week of lineup generator. We got this running for what? Only a week? Is this 1 week we're running this?
Yeah, just gonna be a few days that this promo goes on. So it's gonna be ending early next week. And yeah, if you guys sign up, link below. It already has the promo code loaded in there. If you click on that link either below or the one that Jordan just threw into chat. But if you sign up through that link, $5, you're going to get access to the MLB lineup generator. If you do sign up through the site, the promo code is double. And the reason that the promo code is double and the price is $5, just double. It's worth 5 fantasy points on DraftKings. So fun little gimmick to that. And if you guys have been wanting to sign up for the lineup generator, not only do you get access to the tool itself, it also comes with access to our Discord channel.
Yeah, you get the Discord as well. But yeah, $5 for the first week. Figured, People loved the lineup generator so much last year, had amazing results with it, particularly in some of the lower stakes stuff like the mini maxes and those, but really anything it's viable. Swap players, lock players. Once you go into your lineups too, you can see what the ownership is, right? Like how chalky or contrarian a lineup is, but also what the optimal projection is. And I know a lot of you that use the lineup generator have your own way of being like, all right, I like it to meet this kind of criteria where it's not too chalky, but it has a high optimal projection, all of that stuff. You can discard the ones you don't like, save the ones you like, up to 20 on each run, and then upload them to CSV, DraftKings, or FanDuel. And then what I always say, Greg, like you can choose all stacks, but you can also do stuff, right? And curious to get your thoughts on this, where like, let's say you want some Yamamoto. You could lock him in and then just run it. And then you don't have to only have Yamamoto lineups. You upload like 5 that you like to CSV and then run it again without him locked. You know what I mean? There's many different, like you don't have to do one run. You can do a bunch of different runs and then cumulatively save all of the ones that you want and upload them.
Yep, lots of different ways you can customize your lineups in here, and you guys see us use it on shows all the time. And don't forget, it's for DraftKings and FanDuel, both sites covered.
So yeah, check it out. $5 for the first week. I think you'll love it. If you don't love it, you're down $5, which is it's worth a test drive, given that you spend $5 on probably insane stuff. I know I do that we don't even know about or think of. So yeah, why not make better lineups and win more money for $5? It's a solid investment. All right. So let's get to Woods Richardson. The cash game combo is Wheeler Richardson, correct? Is there any two ways around that?
Nah, that's where you're playing in cash games today.
How are you approaching Woods Richardson? Because 1, fantastic matchup. 2, minimum salary. But on the other hand, highest owned pitcher on the slate, and clearly just not a proven major league pitcher with legitimate strikeout stuff. So this is a balancing act here. How do you hit this one?
Yeah. So most importantly is that we have a Coors Field game that we're going to want to be getting exposure to again today. And one of the easiest ways to be able to pay up for those hitters is going to be going towards SJW here at pitcher, because he is the flat min. He's actually popular, which a lot of the flat min price pitchers that we've seen recently have not been guys that have picked up any sort of ownership. So we've seen like the Albert Suarez spots where what was it, a week ago when he made his first start of the season, he was the flatman and he was not all that popular. But we do have a guy here in Woods Richardson who is making his second start of the year. The first one did go pretty well. His stuff looked decent as well. Average fastball velocity, 93.5 miles per hour. He was throwing strikes. If we look at some of the background on him, he's not some sort of ace prospect or anything like that. He's the 8th ranked prospect in the Twins organization, according to the data at Fangraphs, and then also not a ranked prospect overall. So this isn't some guy who's like a slam dunk to be a great player or anything like that. It's just the price point makes it hard to get away from him. And a lot of the same stuff we said about Suarez when he was making his start the other day as well, which is if he goes out, he could pitch 5 innings, give up 3 runs, have 4 strikeouts, couple hits or something like that. If he puts up like 9-10 fantasy points and then a high-priced offense goes off, that's really all you need from him at his price point. So I don't have like a big stand on him relative to his ownership. I have him in 40% of my lineups right now, which is about in line with the field. And it's solely due to his price point. Where I do think it gets interesting is when we talk about potentially stacking against him for leverage when we get to offenses.
Yes. And I already saw a couple comments in chat about that. Isn't it amazing though, that the White Sox, even against this guy, even against SWR, have a 3.2 run implied total? Crazy.
I think that's a little low for like, I know that the White Sox offense isn't good.
I agree. It's just still crazy.
I'm interested to see like if I go to FanDuel right now, just as a reference point, what is the pitchers in this game are Twins, White Sox, and the total is 8.
Yeah. Yeah.
Soroka, Richardson as the pitching options, the total is 8. That seems low to me. What is the individual team totals? It's going to correlate with the overall total, but
And I wonder how much of this is Minnesota. The wind's blowing in from left field at 13 miles per hour, 62 degrees. But is that enough?
I think these totals are too low. The White Sox team total is 3.5 runs, and it's plus money on the over. I'm gonna have to consider betting that.
It's pretty crazy. Hold on a second here. Go to DraftKings. Maybe it's not updating right for me, but does DraftKings still have Bailey Ober up there? Because they did this morning. I just refreshed it.
On the sports book?
Yeah.
Let's see. They have wrong starting pitchers all the time. Yes, they do have Bailey Ober listed. The other day, or I guess it was yesterday, Blake Snell got scratched. They still had Snell listed as the starter for a while.
Yeah, they've been doing that a lot lately. So unimportant, but either way.
Well, it's important from just a betting angle to let people know. There's this general idea a lot of people have, like, oh my God, the sports books know everything and they've got inside information. They're really smart. They are not at all in certain markets. Baseball is one of them. You get a starting pitcher scratch, they often won't update the odds or change prices for like 20, 30 minutes.
Yes. I meant unimportant for you and me doing this show right now.
Yeah.
But if you go to pitcher props, they have Woods Richardson strikeout props.
Do they have, if you go to the game lines, is there the must start? Yeah, there is. You could bet a line where it's, hey, money line, Bailey Ober must start.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, if you go to the game lines.
Richardson's strikeout prop over 4.5 is juiced minus 140 to the over. Pretty interesting.
They're expecting a decent start out of him, probably just because of solely thinking the White Sox are terrible, because they are.
Right. And for what it's worth, on Odd Shopper, we have the true odds at minus 106. Like FanDuel has it at minus 130, MGM at minus 120. If you like this spot, there's some decent under props over there, like on DraftKings, where you're getting plus money on under 4.5 strikeouts. But all right, so then how much exposure are you getting to Woods Richardson right now, and how much White Sox stacks?
So I have 40% of Woods Richardson. I have 20% of the White Sox. They are I only have two teams that I have a lot of exposure to at offense. It's the Padres and the White Sox. I'm going to play the White Sox in single entry also.
Really? You only have two teams that you have big exposure to, and that's Padres and White Sox?
Yep. In terms of teams that I have double-digit exposure to, like, there's a lot of teams that I have around. Well, actually, I guess if I include my 3-man stack exposure, I also have 10% of the Mariners. But yeah, if I look at my 5-man stack exposure, the only two teams I have double-digit exposure to, Chicago White Sox, San Diego Padres.
What do you think about Philly bats against Nick Martinez?
It's obviously a very good hitter's park. Nick Martinez is not an elite starting pitcher by any stretch of the imagination. And the Phillies also, in terms of, let's see, where are they at? They're 8.8% projected ownership. That's right in line with where I am with them. So it's a good spot for them. The field is also there in a way that generally makes sense, though.
There's a question. Will the White Sox win 20 games this year in chat? They will, but there's a lot of how many, if you had to set a line on them right now, knowing what we know, how many wins would you give the Chicago White Sox?
So am I setting the line as a sports book, or me as this is what I think the most fair line is?
You're setting the line correct as a sports book.
Okay. So if I'm a sports book, I have to set this line low. I have to, because people are going to bet the under basically no matter what the line is. So it's going to skew towards being low without knowing what it is on FanDuel or DraftKings, because I think they usually have live updated total odds. I could check in a second. I would guess 52.5. If the line actually is that, though, I would like the over. But I'm sure it's somewhere in the mid to low 50s.
They're pacing. Yeah, currently they're pacing 20 wins, but I can't. That's great. But that won't hold up. You put it low 50s?
They've got it. They've got one.
Where?
FanDuel, because they every day they update. So I just pulled it up. Without looking at it, guess what the number is.
48.5.
It's 54.5 juice towards the under. So
Okay.
it wasn't that far off from what I
No,
thought books would do.
Solid. That was good. I think people still take the under on that.
Probably. The live FanGraphs projection has the White Sox projected win total at 57.5 now.
Seems high. But of course you're going to say that when a team's 3-21, they're bad though. Anyway, yeah, I think Philly against Martinez is definitely a spot that looks very viable. We talked about Seattle. Andrew Heaney's fine because he's so cheap, but and he's also getting some ownership. Seattle profiles real well in our top stacks tool, third highest stack score behind San Diego and Minnesota. Heaney gives up power. It's a good spot. Minnesota's another one against Soroka. They have the second highest stack score for us. All three of those teams are pretty popular. The one team I want to talk about, though, the Dodgers, right now, if you're just looking at ownership share as far as the stack goes, Dodgers are the second highest owned team, highest owned stack behind San Diego on this slate. Are you getting to a lot of LA?
I am not. So with the Dodgers today, the problem with the Dodgers, really, if I'm paying up for an offense, I'm going to go to San Diego in Coors Field. And then also, if you're playing the Dodgers offense, a lot of people are going to be playing the same sort of lineup. It's going to be the Dodgers with Woods Richardson at pitcher. And that kind of makes the most sense. It is hard to get to the Dodgers otherwise. The Dodgers are a team I very seldomly make 5-man stacks of. I make a good amount of 3-man stacks of the Dodgers, but their price point just often makes them prohibitive to get to because the hitters you actually want to roster from the team, Ohtani, Betts, Freddie Freeman, Will Smith, they're all so expensive you can't even fit them in lineups together. And then you have to kind of play some of the shittier Dodgers hitters at the tail end of the lineup, which are guys that you don't really want to play all that much because they're no different than a lot of the other hitters on other teams. So I've found it very difficult. I think I've only had 2 slates the entire year where I've really gotten to Dodger stacks.
Here's a fun one. Here's a fun one for you. What if, all right, so let's say we're getting some White Sox stacks in there. Maybe we can build something out real quick, or we can look at what we've got in the lineup simulator as well and see what, like, Jordan, go to the lineup simulator and do me a favor, go to exposures and toggle on stack exposures. All right, so we are getting some White Sox stacks. So go to lineups, and when you go to lineups, go to stack and no, other stack, not the stack type, but stack to the left of that. Yeah, and then filter by White Sox. So my question, Greg, is, are we just going to have a ton of Wheeler, Yamamoto, and that in these White Sox stacks? Because obviously you're not playing Woods Richardson. The White Sox in our top stacks tool have a 19.5%, 19.5% top value score, by far the highest on the slate. Only one close is Minnesota. What do your lineups look like if you're stacking the White Sox, even like a 4-man White Sox stack?
Yeah. Wheeler, Yamamoto. Here's a Wheeler Heeney one because it's a Dodgers White Sox stack with the Dodgers as a secondary. Yeah, it's almost entirely Wheeler and Yamamoto. There's some Wheeler Castillo, there's some Yamamoto Castillo, but it's for the most part going to just be some version of the spend up pitchers.
Man, talk about killing 2 birds with 1 stone. This is exactly what you preached on, I think, Live Before Lock the other day with Colorado against the very chalky Michael King.
especially in single entry where we could see Woods Richardson as popular as 50, 60% even maybe. And then just everybody's going to play the Padres. You get yourself on a totally different lineup build that's also going to be leverage off the field.
I mean, Mike, dude, in single entry, how popular is Woods Richardson Wheeler plus Padres going to be?
Very, very popular. And for good reason. I think if you're just building a lineup and you're trying to say this is what's going to score the most fantasy points, that's what you go play. But here's the problem. If that stack goes off, right? Padres have a big game, Wheeler pitches well, Woods Richardson pitches well, then you're competing with a ton of lineups to win at the top of contests.
Yeah.
The Padres could be the highest scoring team on the slate. You could stack them, both those pitchers go out. You might not even cash because so many people are going to play that lineup build. But if the White Sox hit Woods Richardson, that lineup is going to cash. It's guaranteed just because of the kind of leverage that you're getting. And that's the way that I'm going to be approaching it in single entry.
Yeah, you're going to end up just like 2v2ing against everybody. It's going to be pretty ugly. What else do you think makes sense then on a day like today? Of course, anyone can go out there and we could say, yeah, okay, stack Padres, stack this, stack whoever. But is there anything just from a game theory perspective, like strategically, that you're looking to get to in either multi-entry, single entry that you think makes sense? Because to me, I think, first off, just getting away from Woods Richardson, even though he makes everything so easy, and that's why people are going to do it, that's one step. Like, that's the easiest step right there. I'd much rather get away from him than Wheeler, who you accurately described as an ace, a top ace. What are some other plays here?
Yeah, so if we're looking at other offenses, in terms of leverage, there isn't really all that much just because there's only 3 pitchers that are all that popular. So from a leverage standpoint, I'm going to say not that much. But if you're just looking for a lower owned offense that our top stacks tool does indicate is a little bit too low owned, it is the Colorado Rockies again. Funny enough, this is like the 3rd consecutive slate they've showed up as one of the most under-owned teams in the tool. But another one, they've got a good matchup against Randy Vasquez. The Rockies are going to be shit more often than not, but it is a Coors Field spot, so you can make a case for them, but they're not necessarily a priority for me. It's just a team I get exposure to.
Any other spots we want to hit on before we get out of here? And if you guys have any questions, feel free to hit us up. We still got some time if we need to.
Yeah, there's some questions in Discord, which I just typed in an answer to people. One thing that I will add about the slate is that if the Kansas City-Toronto game starts on time, I have no interest in the pitchers. I have to take them out because I think it's very likely the game's going to have an in-game delay, and that's death to starting pitchers. So considering that it looks like we haven't heard the game being delayed, so it seems like there's a pretty good chance that it's going to start on time. That's very, very, very risky for the starting pitchers. That game goes into an in-game delay. So I'm most apt to take them out right now. We did have Go Tigers ask who's the sneaky stack of the slate. That for me is going to be the White Sox. I think that's the team that makes the most sense from a leverage standpoint, also having lower ownership themselves. And then Einstein asked, with Heeney picking up some ownership and Soroka getting no ownership, would Soroka be a good pivot to get to, considering the Twins are chalk? Just not enough upside in Soroka for me.
Yeah, you can pivot, but I don't think you need to pivot to Soroka. Oh, by the way, guys, many of you already over there on Sleeper. If you are, Jalen Brunson free square today, not just for new users, for everybody, for everyone. Half a point. Even with this shooting slump over the first 2 games, doesn't matter. Half a point on Jalen Brunson for everybody, whether you're new or whether you're an existing user. Jalen Brunson today, game 3, Knicks Sixers, over half a point at Sleeper. Also, if you're new and you wanted to sign up, link in the description and in chat, up to $500 first match deposit bonus. That means if you put 500 in, now you have 1,000. If you put 100 in, you have 200. 50, you now have 100. Doubled it instantly out of the gate. No hoops to jump through, no strings attached. Double up that deposit up to $500 plus a Jalen Brunson free square. Is there another free square for new users today? Because I know this one, they usually do a lot of free squares for new users. Can they double up? Like, is there a new one or one for new users and the Brunson one?
Let's see. I believe there is. We have on Thursday.
Yamamoto. All right, there you have it. Yamamoto, half a strikeout as well against Washington. So if you're not there and you've been on the fence or you've just been ignoring me every time, I get it. Now's the time to do it. The bonus and double free squares today, Brunson and Yamamoto. So that's huge. All right, let's do this, Greg, before we go. Top 3 pitchers today. Wheeler's already one of them. But let's, provide some context to this. Like, who are some guys you might want to get to that we've talked about, but the field isn't super high on?
Yeah, if I'm looking at the guys who are just not the uber chalk on the slate, then the pivots on the high end is Yamamoto for me. The pivot on the low end is Heeney.
Okay, Yamamoto, Heeney. I like it. I'll add in Castillo just because I think the ownership and the price point are fair. And we have him positively leveraged, 5% leverage in the top pitchers tool. I don't hate that at all. Top 3 stacks, San Diego. I really do like Seattle today. I think Heaney's perfectly fine on the other side. Maybe he channels that strikeout stuff that we've become accustomed to, but I still like them, man. Still slightly positively leveraged, 3rd highest stack score, not super expensive, solid value. There is pop. They're not playing in Seattle. That's one for me. So I'll go San Diego, Seattle, and probably Minnesota.
It is San Diego, the White Sox, and Seattle for me.
Okay. I like it. Hey, appreciate you guys hanging out as always. Follow Greg, Ehrenberg DFS. I'm at Lafayette_D. That promo in the description and in chat, $5 for the first entire week lineup generator. Better than football too, because you have baseball every single day of the week. So you're getting 7 straight days for $5, well under $1 a day when you think about it. Even if you're playing a couple bucks, doesn't matter. Worth it. Anyway, you have questions, hit us up. You decide to do it, jump in Discord, say hello. You have questions there. Thanks to Jordan for producing. We'll see you guys back here tonight. NBA live before lock. No baseball. That's it for the day. We'll see you here tomorrow. Strategy show, 11 o'clock Eastern. Peace.